It's the latest buzz in the health and diet world. People are going gaga over glucose. Once only a term those with diabetes were concerned with, everyday women are now keeping an eye on glucose levels, even going out of their way to eat food in certain orders, all to help manage their weight. So what do you need to know about glucose and your body? Studio 5 health contributor Miki Eberhardt is here to break it all down. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Are you hearing this buzz as well?
Yes, I'm hearing it. And I think most buzz we hear stems something from social media.
Sure.
And so people that are on social media typically are aware. Someone will write a book and then word of mouth.
There's an Instagram account. There's a book called, I think, Glucose Goddess.
Yes.
Women are talking about it. Women are reading it. Women are trying it. Women are going all in with this.
Yeah, and I think, I'm getting asked about certain hacks like, I'm taking apart my sandwich and deconstructing it to eat the vegetables first so that I prevent this blood sugar spike from happening. And while, Brooke, I'm all in teaching people how to kind of stabilize their blood sugar. I don't love the idea of micromanaging every bite that we eat and obsessing over hacks in order to, shift this with our lives and our bodies, because what can happen is that effort to try and be healthier can become obsessive, which stops us from the very thing that we're trying to get, which is better health.
Better health. So can I stabilize my blood sugar, as you coined it, kind of a worthy effort?
Yes.
Without deconstructing my sandwich or without looking at my plate and analyzing what order I should be eating those foods in?
Yes. Yes, you definitely can. There are ways that we can, patterns that we can have with our food in general, how we eat carbohydrate, amounts, things like that can be a great way to have good, stable blood sugar without having to overanalyze.
And we only have so much time, but nerd out with me for just a little bit. What is glucose?
So
how does it affect the body?
So glucose is a sugar that comes from food that our body uses for energy. It's a preferred source of energy. And so what happens when we eat carbohydrate, the glucose breaks down, it causes our blood sugar to rise. That tells our pancreas to release insulin to bring that rise back down. And insulin is like the key that unlocks the door to all your cells. And they're like, come on in, glucose. We could use you for some energy. And so that process is natural and normal. We're not going to have blood sugar like this. We're normally going to have
the up and down.
Up and down. We just want to avoid what I call roller coaster blood sugar.
And what's the downside? If my blood sugar is spiking during the day, I'm going to feel what?
Right. Too high, you're going to feel sluggish, tired, brain fog maybe as well, lack of energy. That can be a real drive that you feel like I have to have caffeine all the time because I'm so tired. If I'm not getting that glucose into my cells for energy because it's too high, it stays too high, that's that feeling. If it's too low, I'm feeling shaky, I'm feeling fatigued, I'm those hangry feelings. I'm not a fun person to be around in that situation, but so we want to avoid the extremes is the goal there.
And you've got some realistic ways we can do this, starting with just thoughtfulness, like thinking ahead of how we're eating and when we're eating.
Think ahead. If you're going to be out and about for a longer period of time, you're not going to have food available, your blood sugar is going to drop. So I have nuts in my car all the time. They're fine in the heat, they're fine in the cold. If I get too hungry or I'm out longer than I want to be, I can always just grab a handful of nuts.
Because that glucose level will dip if we're not consistently fueling our body.
Exactly. Yeah, most people need fuel about every 3 to 4 hours. Is a good kind of frame of reference to go from. And so if I'm gone, I go to work and I have all these errands and I go to kids or whatever it may be, you can surpass that and that blood sugar starts to drop.
Okay.
The problem then is that when you eat, it's usually going to bing, ding, cause that spike.
So we want to kind of maintain it as best we can.
Correct.
Which speaks to this idea of not skipping meals and working in snacks.
Right. Don't skip meals or snacks. If we're kind of using that frame of reference of every 3 to 4 hours, then thinking through that when it comes to meals and snacks. I know it can be easy, like have a Diet Coke or an energy drink or coffee and kind of skip that meal and keep moving on, but inevitably that will lead to a sharper spike in your insulin, in your blood sugar, excuse me, when you do eat again.
So a Diet Coke replacement for a meal is not going to be my friend.
No.
All right. And you're always promoting this idea of listening to your body, like those fullness cues, those hunger cues. You say that can be your guide.
It really is, because if you are listening, if you're honoring your hunger and your satiety, your fullness levels, what happens is if I start to feel hungry, if I honor that and eat when I'm feeling those hunger pains, that blood sugar isn't going to keep going if I refrain to eat. Flip side, if I am eating a meal and I'm feeling satisfied, and I even had dessert with it, and I loved it, and that was delicious, and I'm full. If I refrain from, yeah, but those cookies were so good, and I'm gonna keep going 3, 4, 5 more, that's causing that blood sugar to just keep going up. So if I'm honoring it, it naturally is gonna bring that blood sugar into a more moderate frame.
Isn't it interesting how all the sound principles cycle back to each other? I'm hearing you describe intuitive
It's
eating
true.
and mindful eating and those solid habits that serve us.
It's exactly right, Brooke.
You would encourage women, though, if you want to take an action step, to try to include more groups. What do you mean by that?
Yes, and I think when it comes to meals and snacks, the more food groups, the better.
Okay.
I think meals naturally are going to lend itself to food groups. No one's having like a meal of rice. There's going to be some protein and
Sure.
some fat and some sauce. So I want to give some suggestion for snacks.
Great.
That typically, instead of just maybe a carb, to have fiber and protein and fat present as well, which cause a slower rise, keep you fuller longer, slower drop.
So it's taking the same principles that as, moms and matriarchs we instill into our family dinners, the protein, the carb, and trying to break that down into a snack.
You got it.
Give it to us. I love it.
Okay, so starting here, an apple, great choice, always.
Yes.
But this is going to be fruit, which is a carb, has some fiber in it because it's a whole food, which is fine, but it is going to cause the blood sugar spike. So if I pair that with a little bit of peanut butter that has protein and fat, it's going to slow that response.
Nice.
Keep you fuller longer.
Okay.
Having said that, with all of these, Brooke, if all I have is an apple, don't overthink it. Eat the apple.
Okay.
It's fine. Okay. Here.
Eat the apple.
Eat the apple.
I feel reassured.
Grapes, whole fruit, carbohydrate, pair it with a string cheese, protein, fat. It's going to keep that rise from going too far, too high, too fast.
Good combo.
Instead of grabbing a handful of pretzels out of the pantry, dip it in some hummus. This is going to be fiber, protein, and fat, keep you fuller longer.
Okay.
Cottage cheese, great protein source. Pair it with melon. I personally like tomatoes in my cottage cheese, but if you want to do peaches or pineapple, I know people love fruit with their cottage cheese. Pairing those two together, we've got the carbohydrate here, but then we've got protein and fat here.
Okay.
And then strawberries, amazing, always. Just pair it with a little bit of nuts, and that's going to slow the rise.
This is
slow
so
the
helpful
fall.
just to see the combinations. And finally, quickly, you point out it's always helpful to move after we eat.
Yes, and research backs that up, that even just a 10-minute movement after a meal helps slow that rise in blood sugar. And that it made me laugh when I was reading that research because my in-laws have this habit when you go over for Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
We eat dinner and they're like, anyone want to go for an FW? And that stands for family walk.
I love it.
Put on your shoes and go.
Working those FWs after your meals. Thank you for taking the
Yes.
trend, cutting through it, and helping us focus on what matters, which is how we feel and ultimately the wellness and health of our body. We love you for that, Miki.